Welcome back. I'm going to start this section with our NPC. There's a couple things that I can get out of the way and then we won't need to come back to the NPC. First off is in the scriptable object. This is going to, you can put a lot more into here because you can change the NPC's sprite, you can change the NPC's name. There's a whole bunch of things you can change inside of the NPC scriptable object. For now, the only thing I want to do is to say that this NPC is currently, so you can use code to change it at later dates, but it is currently holding a conversation tree, and let's just call this NPC conversation. Very good. Okay, so if you have a system where the storyline advances through different chapters and every time you go back to a certain NPC they'll have a different conversation, you can actually swap out an entire conversation tree just by dropping one scriptable object into this slot. So going to the actual script that runs the NPC now, we are going to add first off, I want to go to our conversation tree. This is what's going to be dropped onto the NPC, and I just want to add two quick lines. We will come back to this later, but scene vector 2. So as I said, if you're using a system where the NPC will change over the story period, after the conversation you can actually switch this to turn off so that your NPC is no longer in the scene. But then later in the storyline, if I change the conversation tree, by default this would switch back on, and it means that, so I can say in scene equals true, and that way when I add a new conversation tree and you go back to that scene, the player is going to be there again with a new conversation, and he might also be in a different scene location. So the conversation tree will help that out. So going back to our NPC script now. So for our NPC script, I want to add in a void awake, and I also want to add, let me just check my notes. Right, so I need to add the public object and this NPC. So this is the reference to the, so the NPC script is going to be on a prefab, and that prefab, when I dropped a new scriptable object onto that prefab, it's going to give me a totally different NPC. So this is the reference to that NPC scriptable object. I also need to make a reference to it here to say if this, actually the opposite of this NPC dot, and let's get the NPC conversation that's on it, and we'll find out if it's in scene. So if it's not in scene, then what do? We destroy it. If it isn't seen, we're not destroying it, then this dot game object dot transform dot position is equal to new vector 3 let's do this npc dot conversation dot scene location dot x. Alright, let's just copy that out. Make this y and 0 for z. Semicolon. And that is it for awake. So we'll probably be coming back to the NPC script, but for now we're finished with NPC scriptable object. I'll leave these in here because we might need them later. Okay, so moving on, let me check my notes. Before we get into a lot more programming, the dialog script, which is all over the place, I want to be able to add something to this, and that is going to be a public enum and we use that enum in different areas. Quite a few places we'll be using that left and right, so I just want to be able to stick that there so that we have it. Okay, so I'm going to start with the main dialog system. So this is where two people are talking back and forth. It's actually expandable that you can create as many people as you want, so you can have 3-4 people having a conversation. So first thing is I'm going to create a class because we want to gather some information about the people who are actually talking. So first thing I want to do is this will be a system.serializable so that we can access it outside of our script. And this is a public class, and let's call it simple people info. Okay, so all this is going to have is a public string, and let's call this person's name, and the next one will be a public sprite, and this will be person's avatar. So we can see that this is where we will store the avatar image for the person. This should be about all we need. Okay, so we're actually going to be using quite a few lists. So I'm going to create a list for this. So public list, and we will put people info, and let's call this one okay, according to my notes, conversation avatars is equal to new list people info. So at the beginning we can set out a list of everybody who is actually in the conversation, and it will assign them an index in my list, so we can just refer to the index. Next is I want to set up a class, so another one, system.serializable public class, and we will call this conversation. So this is going to contain all the elements of a one-sided conversation, me saying something to someone else, or that person saying something to me. It might take more than one text box, but it is me to someone. When they want to come the other direction, we would have, you'll see how it works. It's going to have a list of these things that you can change who's actually talking. So for this, I want to do a public string, and let us call this convo description. So it's just a quick description of who's doing the talking. This will also be a public int, and this will be what I discussed before. This will be the person avatar int. So that is the int for their avatar. We also want a public. Now this is what I set up before, and we will put this as screen position. And lastly, we will have a public list string, and this will be the chat that I'm having. Save. So now I want to just do a separation here. I've seen many people online asking about how to do a solid line for separations, and there's quite a lot of complex stuff. I really and truly don't like to do things complex. And that is that. So now I will do another public list, and this list is going to be conversation, and we will call it faux conversation. Good. Let's do another section here, and this will be all the stuff that happens when the conversation is over. So first I want to do public bool. When I finish talking, will there be a question at the end of it? Public int. Which question will it be? When we are looking at our conversation tree, we're going to add some stuff to the conversation tree, which is going to hold all of the questions, all of the conversations. That way I can pick a question from the list by its int, by its index, which is an int. The next one is, let's do another header. And this will be, so if I exit the conversation at any point and I come back to it, I don't want to have to start all over again. Or maybe for the programmer, they've already made a couple of question choices that led down different branches, and you don't want them to start over again. So you can start them at the head of a branch. So at the end of this conversation, we can actually change where the conversation is going to pick back up at the start of the next time we chat with the person. So this will be to alter the tree. First things first, I want to know public bool, am I going to be altering the start position? Where do I start from? And is that start point a conversation? Is it dialogue or is it a question? This doesn't really need a header, but I want to know at the end of this conversation, do I remove the NPC from the scene? That is the end of our dialog scriptable object. So we can move on, but first let's just take a look at how this is going to play out. Wait for it to refresh, and let's go look at the dialogue. So for the dialogue, I have my conversation avatars, and let's say it's two people having a conversation. This will be Sally, and the second one will be Mark. This is Sally, and this is Mark. For the conversation, let's do an easy two-sided one. The first one is going to be Sally to Mark. So her avatar is going to be 0, and I want her on screen left, and she will say two things to him. I want her to say, "Good morning, Mark," and the second thing I want her to say is, "I hope you are doing well this morning." Yeah, I forgot. I want to take these. Let's go back here. Where are they? They are chat. So for the chat, I actually want to say that they are a text area. Let's refresh. Much better. Okay, so that's what Sally says, and we can come over to the second one, and this is going to be Mark to Sally, and he is 1, and I want him on the right, and he's only going to say one thing. I am doing well, thank you for asking. So I can quickly see how this conversation is going here, and then after the conversation, maybe I want to ask a question. I can alter the start to say that it'll start on a question, so we won't go through this the next time I restart my chat. I don't want to remove the NPC, but this is just a basic rundown on how the dialogue would work, and we can call this their greeting. So that conversation's for their greeting. I can have multiple conversations, which we will demo that a little later once we've got everything working. Okay, so let's check our notes to see what we have to do after we finish that. So okay, so I want to set up in our dialog script, which is going to be running everything. I want to set up a couple of variables at the beginning. First off, we will be making a lot of references to the user interface. So we need to add unity engine.ui. And now let's just set up a couple of these variables that I'm going to want. Okay, so I can start this, and using headers just to make things nice and neat. The dialog and the dialog will contain public game object dialog text area. That's going to be the text box that's going to contain the dialog, I believe. Public game object, and this is going to be the actual text object. Next will be the header. This header is for the questions. Once again, public game object, and this will be our let's call it dialog question area. And we also need to get the question. That's the text at the top of the question area, which would be the actual question. Next, for those 4 options, let's create a not a serialized field. System serializable, and this will be a public class, and these will be our answer options. So I'm creating another class because there's going to be many things that we're going to need, but let's call this the options. So in here I need to know public game object answer box object and public game object answer box text. So this will contains answer. This will be put into a list. So public list the options, and we can call this that has a capital T, this one will have small t, so the options, small t, capital T on the, so the options equals new list the options very good. Okay, so that's it for the questions. And we want to put other stuff. All those things that don't really need their own public game object. I do this so much, I might as well just copy it. Public game object. This is going to be the object for the name. This will be the folder that contains the dialog. I don't need to do that. This is the object that contains the dialog opener. That will be the left avatar, so therefore this will be the right avatar. And another header. conversation tree. Convo tree. Okay, so the dialog script is obviously going to be dependent on what conversation tree is going to be loaded up. So it needs to find out what currently is loaded onto the NPC, and it will store that in here so that it can access everything that it needs. For now, we will finish with that. We're going to come back to it later and add some more variables as well as a lot of script. So, but we're finished with that for now. Let me check my notes. And let us go and do some linking inside of Unity now. Okay, so here is our dialog system. And here's all the things that we need to add. So first things first, dialog position, that will be in the off. Dialog box will also be off. Question box will be off. Our avatars will be off. So there's quite a lot of things that start in the off. The dialog opener will be off, and since these things are off, we can't call on them by using GameObject-find because it won't find them. However, they will be stored in here. So our dialog text area. This will be the dialog box, and it will be the dialog text. The question area will be the dialog box, the question, and a maximum of 4 elements. So let us open each of these. 3, 4. And let's open all of these. So here we have our answer 0 and the answer text 0. We have our answer 1 and our answer text 1. We have our answer 2 and so on and so forth. And that is it for the options. Next, the name object. So let's close that. The name object. So here we have I don't need the box. I only need the actual name. The dialog holder. So this holds this holds the dialog, and this holds the opener. Okay, so in our dialog box, in our holder, we have our avatar left and we have our avatar right. This will be filled in by script. I'm only putting it there so that there is a visual area that we can see what is being loaded up as we're doing our tests. But that could be private. And that is where I will cut that off for now.